Hey, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Julie Tumoon, of course, and I'm blessed to be here with you today. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Julie Tumoon, and I am the creator of the Thriving Health Program, where we take women from surviving and stuck and not in flow and inflamed and hormonal and bring them to a state of thriving and vitality. And a big part of that is our stress response. And so, it's interesting. A lot of the ways that we talk about life in our self accolades and in the way we give accolades to others are actually honoring and promoting this rabid stress response. And so I thought, oh, we need to have a conversation about what it looks like if you're addicted to stress and to the effective stress response in your life, on your body. Because the fact is that a lot of times we are not aware. Someone said to me the other day, I'm not a person who would ever say, oh, I'm super stressed. Sorry, I'm going to move my chair down a second. There we go. I'm not a person who would ever say I'm super stressed. And this is a woman who has been able to manage a million things at once. Man, she is a taskmaster. She has moved a whole household full of kids and herself on her own numerous times in her life. She could manage everything. And I said, of course, because it's your model of the world that we can manage anything. But the truth is that your biology has been running on stress forever, and it's so adapted to it that you call this normal. And this is where we actually have inadvertently become addicted to running in that stress response. And we've called this model of function our normal. And so the idea that there'd be anything that needs to be changed is kind of foreign to some people until they start to get sick. And this is a big problem because we can spend years and years living in that stress response where we are constantly engaging our biology, constantly charging ahead, constantly forcing those stress hormones to come and rise and respond and direct our body. And the more we call it normal, the less we see it as something that needs to be changed. And we are setting ourselves up for disaster because the longer we live there, we are literally on a daily basis, we are shutting down liver function. We are diminishing kidney function. We are taxing our organs. We are shutting down cell response to the thyroid. We are shutting down estrogen and progesterone balance. Therefore, we're shutting down our fertility and our libido and how our brain's going to function. And we are making it that we're going to age rapidly and our metabolism is going to be slow. And we are going to set ourselves up with the metabolic byproducts, unfortunately, that also lead to cancer and all kinds of other chronic disease. And so I think it's important to be able to recognize if you're a person living in that addicted to stress response state and to be able to see it, because a lot of times we just don't see it. So one big sign that you're probably addicted to running in stress response is that you're going to say to people, well, if I don't have that workout, my day just isn't right. And that you will do that workout regardless of what's going on, how you feel, or anything else. And I say that that's an addiction to stress. I know some of you are probably already objecting, but I say that that is an addiction to stress response because most of the time, if that is how you're operating, you've disconnected from your body giving feedback. Because I guarantee you that a lot of times if your body was allowed to give feedback, you would be skipping the workout because you'd be recognizing that there wasn't the reserves. And yet you're leaning into that stress response because a lot of people say, well, if I don't get my workout in the morning, I can't get anything done. And the reason is that you need that extra push to drive those stress hormones up again, to give you that brain boost so that you can feel like you're on task. So it's literally, you actually now need even more. It's almost like needing, energy drinks or something. You're using exercise the same way. So you're addicted to that response. The better thing would be to be able to say, oh, well, I'm great whether I got in some movement or not, because regardless, I'm going to feel fantastic. So that's the converse to that one. Another one is, you guys, if you have constipation as part of what you experience in your body, you're addicted to stress response. You're running on stress hormones. Constipation is not It's not dehydration in almost any case I've ever seen. So please, if you think that you just need to drink more water, you can distance that thought right now. It has a direct relationship to thyroid. It has a direct relationship to your digestive capacity, to the movement of bile, how your liver works, how your spleen works, your stomach acid production. And guess what all those things are dependent on? You not living in stress response. So when you're in stress response, you don't produce bile, your stomach acid goes down, it taxes the liver, it taxes the spleen, it taxes your digestive lumen. That even changes your digestive microflora. So you want to talk about, everyone's all really engaged on the topic of, our gut flora. And so you want to talk about what influences gut flora. Well, living in stress response is going to guarantee that you don't sustain a good microbiome. And then that's going to mean that you don't, sustain a good environment there in those intestines. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to start producing a lot of toxic endotoxin from all those bacterial species. And those endotoxin, the ones that are more pathogenic, are going to produce a lot of tissue estrogen. And that's going to drive up your estrogen in the tissues, even if your ovarian production or your adrenal production is low. And that's going to block thyroid. See how it just all fed back together? You just got right back into the same loop. Now, that's also going to diminish because you can have your gap junctions in the colon start to get irritated by living in that chronic state of irritation. Then you're going to have food particles cross that are bigger than they should be. You're going to start to have food sensitivities. You're going to notice your food sensitivities grow. You're going to wonder, well, I guess now I just have to cut out this food, that food, this food, that food. The origin of that was all stress response. And that constipation and non-movement of your gut is because that whole terrain is totally disrupted by that chronic state and the fact that you're not producing bile, you're not producing stomach acid, and your body can't break things down. That's another big one. You also are living in stress response and addicted to it if you're peeing more than, let's say, 6 times per day. So if you are the person who always has to know where a bathroom is, or if you drink a cup of tea or coffee and it's going to go through you, and so you can't do that if you're going to get in a car, or you can't drink a glass of water and then get in a car, the odds are you're living in stress response. That urination response is that chronic stimulation of those kidneys by those stress hormones that produces that copious urine production, which relates strongly, again, it actually relates back to thyroid and the tissue response. But that is another huge indication that you are living in that addicted to stress response state. If you find out that you're not hungry often, I hear people say that, I'm just not hungry. So you're a person who thinks, I think intermittent fasting would be great for me because I don't want to eat until noon. You are living in stress response. You are addicted to it. And a lot of people love this time of day. I hear this all the time. They'll say, oh, I love not eating in the morning. I feel so light. I feel so clear. That is because adrenaline is one of the most potent compounds ever made in nature, and its stimulation to the brain is like pure jolt. And we get so addicted to it, and because your gut is so dysfunctional from having lived in stress response so long, you feel better when you don't eat. That is another sign that you are living and addicted to stress response. It is not an ideal state to live. Not putting things in the gut does not make it heal. It does not improve the terrain. It does not balance the flora, does not help your liver, does not help your thyroid, does not help your adrenals. All of those systems are being compromised while you exist in that state. So you also might notice that you don't have a sex drive, or even that your brain doesn't think about sex, your body doesn't respond to sex the same way. It's another huge indication that you're addicted to stress response. You're running in stress response because literally your body is turning off processes that don't go towards like life survival techniques, and that's one of them. And this has to do also with the fact that the longer we live here, we really change our body's natural innate hormonal balance. And so we start to see that we don't have a desire for sex. Maybe even when we have sex, our orgasms aren't as good. Maybe we notice that those tissues don't respond as well. They're dry. They don't get moist. Their tissue integrity isn't good. Maybe all those things are true. but that's another huge sign that you're existing and running in stress response. Muscle cramps are another massive one, because the effect of stress is that you eat through your magnesium levels so quickly, and so then the muscles and go towards that crampiness, and magnesium is dependent on a lot of other things. So just taking it a lot of times doesn't solve the problem, because in order to get the magnesium inside the cell, you have to be remedying the stress response in the tissues. And this is what doesn't happen a lot of times. So I hear people all the time, they take copious amounts of magnesium and it doesn't change that picture. Classic sign you're running in stress response. Headaches and migraines, another classic sign that you're running in stress response, because your body's producing that inflammatory response. You've got the muscle tension, that they also often relate to thyroid and the gut, and how the cells are existing in that chronically inflamed, exacerbated stress response state. And so you get headaches. Another one is that if you're running in stress response, if you're one of those people that restricts with your food and then ends up binging on something crazy, or you're like, you do that I'll be good all week and bad all weekend, and keep like riding that seesaw, that all by itself creates stress response. But it also tells me that you live in that need to control cycle, which is one that in the body equals that same kind of response. The cells, under the effect of that desire to constantly control, they get rigid, and they're always bracing. It's like your whole body's going like this, like it's waiting for the next thing, and you can't absorb nutrients from that state, and your metabolism isn't going to work right. But you go into the not good, the binge, whatever you want to call it, off the plan cycle, because it's like you can only stand so much, and then you have to like let go. And that's that whole emotional release. And it's your body trying to direct, some kind of like re-regulation balance, but getting stuck in the process. If you're bloated often, it's another huge sign. It goes back to the whole conversation we were having about the gut and the gut balance and the microbiome and the production of bile and stomach acid and all of these things. So it's another big place to watch. Oh, am I addicted to running in stress response? If you are a person who doesn't accept help very easily, if you're always living in that, well, I guess it's all on me. I just have to be the one who's going to get all this done. No one else can do it as good as me. No one else is going to step up and do it. I never get any help. They never step up and help me. I guarantee you're running in stress response, and you've adapted to the point where now your cells aren't even receptive to feedback, which also means receptive to love. And that will show up both in your own personal relationship with self and in your relationship with others. And you may notice that a lot of your relationships are contentious, the relationship with you and with other people in your life, because you've ridden the stress response ride so long that now you're not even open to receiving. So now it's like you don't let people love you. You don't let them take care of you. You assume that they don't want to, or that they wouldn't do it good enough, or that they aren't interested in helping. And then that becomes toxic. And I see this show up in a lot of women who ride in stress response for a long period of time, and their spouses don't understand what's happening. They just know that their wife got bitchy and is always complaining, and often acts as if they aren't doing enough. And it's because you're riding so long in stress response that you're stuck there. That bitchiness, that anger, that's another big sign that you are addicted to stress response, that you keep looping back into that cycle and have called it normal. Your need to constantly be checking things off the list and achieving. There's always got to be an accomplishment happening. You can't ever be off task. Another huge sign that you're addicted to running in stress response. So what do we do about all this, right? Because as you can tell, this isn't just a physical event. This is how our mind works. These are beliefs we've established. This is part of our emotional makeup. It's every part of us that gets adapted and starts to call this normal. I've heard women say, oh, I've been constipated my whole life. That's just how I am. That's just how they are. Or I don't sleep well. That's just how I am. That's not true for anybody. Same thing with libido. Same thing with, having a gorgeous skin, glowing skin, a vibrant metabolism. Those are all supposed to be our normals. They aren't reserved for just some people, you guys. That's a myth. I think that's a line that we've been fed because people don't know how to help. But it is not the case that those things are normal. Feeling vital, having a gut that moves, not being bloated, not having pain, having lots of energy, sleeping great, having a libido, those are all normal attributes of a healthy woman. So if you're not living there, the odds are you've become very accustomed to living in stress response. So one thing is you're going to have to slow down. I can't stress this enough. I know I say it a million times, but like literally, you need to start to really assess, is this thing necessary? This thing that I'm saying absolutely must be done. And that may mean, and I've said to my clients before, maybe those dishes do sit in the sink overnight. Maybe you don't have to mop the floor every day. Maybe you don't have to vacuum twice a day. And I say that because the more we go into that stress response, we tend to start stacking. So we start stacking things that we absolutely must do, and we call them essential. I once had a client who was like, I have to vacuum the floor twice a day and dust the entire house every day and mop 4 times a week because of my dogs or whatever. And it was this belief that if it wasn't done that way, all of life would fall apart. And that's just simply not true. But it was keeping her engaged in this stress response paradigm. And the problem there, some of you may experience this if you decide to start to slow down, is that you actually have to start to feel what your body's really been feeling. I guarantee you, if you start to slow down, you may start saying, well, now I'm twice as tired. Yeah, you're not twice as tired. That's how tired you were before. You just kept driving yourself so hard that you never noticed. The reality is that when you start to slow down and let your body express itself, you may discover that the situation is a lot worse than you thought it was. And that is an essential part of healing, is start to recognize. You guys, when I first realized how exhausted I really was, and I let myself have the full experience, I went through a span of time where there were times where it was like, oh my gosh, if someone else could lift my arms, that would be great. But the reality was I'd driven myself so hard, and I didn't allow any leeway for that experience, that until I stepped into that slowing down state, did I really realize what I'd really had going on inside of me the whole time. And what we don't pay attention to never heals. So slowing down is imperative. It is not a luxury. You're not being lazy. It's not self-indulgent. It's a necessary part of communicating and partnering with your divine body so that you can restore the relationship, you can restore your biology, you can get your life back. Now, you also need to start to notice why you do things. Do you power through things because you think no one else is going to step up and do any of it? Do you take on extra because it lets you feel like you're worthy? Do you push through and try to be superwoman because that gets you accolades, or because it's, again, validating your own sense of self-worth, or that's the only way you've ever been, regarded or seen? Those things all matter, and it needs addressing, because that is, our self-worth is not determined by our external experience of how well we show up and do in life. Our self-worth is determined by our heart and the compassion that we can live from, and how we serve, and even sometimes how we're still, and how we treat ourselves. I think it would be lovely to be able to see that really, if you look at your life, if everyone else is getting 1,000% of you and you only give 5% to you, well, then your cap is really 5%. Because how we nourish and love ourselves is going to be the expansive version of how we really can show up for others. And this is something that I think gets so confused, because people think, no, I show up and I serve so well my friends, my family, my children, my spouse. But the reality is, if you're doing all of that at a deficit, where you're constantly draining your pool and you're running on stress response and you're tearing yourself down to do it, the reality is that they're not getting the best version of you. They're not getting the fullness of you. And it's entrenching you in a state of function that not only leads to dysfunctional relationships and relationships that are like out of balance, but it is keeping the balance of you in relationship to your beautiful body out of balance. And it is driving you towards a state where you're going to collapse. And that is a state no one wants to get to. The other things you need to do or can do to get out of being so addicted to stress response is to make sure you're eating carbohydrates. I probably say this every time I speak, but I can't emphasize it enough. Carbohydrates are the fuel that let our body know it's safe to turn off the stress response. If you're not eating carbohydrates, you have no capacity to turn those responses off. Without sufficient carbohydrates in the diet, your body has no choice but to produce cortisol and other stress hormones in order to compensate for the lack of carbohydrates. That is going to mean that whether you want to or not, you are keeping the entrenched addiction to stress response going. So you need carbohydrates, and you need easy to digest ones. You need cooked fruit, you need cooked root vegetables, you need, rice and seed grains like quinoa, buckwheat. You need to have potato and sweet potato. You need your cooked vegetables. You need those foods in your diet every single meal, and you need more carbohydrate at the meal than you have protein. Because without that, if your protein outweighs your carbohydrate, you're going to drive the stress response again, and your body's going to stay stuck there, whether that was your intent or not. And this is extremely important because your biology doesn't lie, and it can't do any other workaround than work with the information you give it. So if you're not giving it this tool, it's going to do the survival mode, which is turn to cortisol, which, by the way, you guys, you live in stress response, you're going to age quicker because those stress hormones break down your immune system, they break down your skin, they break down your connective tissue, they break down your muscle. So if you are also concerned, well, I want to age well, then you're going to want to be eating a balance of foods that support the highest energy state, the best thyroid perfusion, the lowest tissue estrogen, the best function of liver, the best function of the spleen, the best function of the gut, and balance and rest and nourishment to every single organ system. You also want to eat foods that are easy to digest. No raw foods. Zero. Zip. Zilch. Don't be eating the raw foods. Don't eat your raw salads. Don't snack on raw veggies. Don't do your smoothies with, your berries and your kale and your whatevers. Those foods, again, they tax the spleen. They're cold. They're hard to digest. They take more energy than your body wanted to spend. And you're already probably living at an energy deficit. And the consequence of that is that you're going to keep raising that stress bar and keep your body in survival mode. So eat all of that stuff cooked foods only. I know that's out there for some of you because you think, gosh, a salad is my best friend, but it's really not. Switch to cooked veggies and see how different you feel. You also ideally need to be sleeping on a regular and consistent schedule. And by that, I mean, for a lot of you, that's bed by 9 p.m. I know that too. For some of you night owls would be really hard, but you need at least 8 hours of sleep. And I will tell you, in healing, some people need 10. And shirking on sleep is not going to get you anywhere because, again, you're making your biology do the backup mode. It's really all about what mode do you want your body in, because I don't care what your mind says you're going to do. I'm going to do this from a place of serenity and peace. I get it. But your biology has rules and it has conditions, and it has to apply those rules and conditions. So if you're not getting enough sleep, especially at those nighttime hours, I remember even back when I was in naturopathic school, the rule of thumb was every hour before midnight is worth 2 hours for every hour after. So you are better sleeping, from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. than you are going to bed at midnight and sleeping till 7 or something like that. It's gonna bode much better. The reality is that this is all of the cell. These are entrenched habits that are every part of our being. And so I really encourage you to think about those cells and the impact that they're living under. And how are you asking them to live? Do you keep asking them to adapt to you no matter what? Do you keep expecting that they're going to show up no matter what? Do you keep demanding and demanding and demanding and assuming that because you can hatch a plan, they can follow? Because if you are, that's that stress response model. And I guarantee you, it will not keep up with you. Even if right now you feel like, I think it's keeping up with me, I guarantee you it's not going to keep doing it. And here's the deal, some people experience a slow decline, but some people fall off a cliff. I have seen too many women who were fine, 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 fine. Oh, chronically ill, like literally overnight. And they just were one who didn't notice the decline. They were, there's different constitutions, and certain constitutions are not going to notice the decline. They're going to be able to go as if everything's normal, and then one day just boom, it's over. And so some of these guideposts can let you know, what camp are you in? You know, are you forcing your body to live by stress response, calling those responses normal, and then potentially setting yourself up to be one of the ones who tips off the cliff? Or if you're noticing the slow decline, get ahead of it now, because when you start to notice that decline, it's been 10 years already. So you've already been in it 10 years. If you wait until you're like, oh, I really don't feel well, guys, you might be at 15 or 20 years of it. And it's very hard to turn it around. It's very hard to reverse it if you wait and wait and wait. So get ahead of it now, because the odds are, if you're like me, I can look back and see that I entered the stress response living in my 20s. You know, I lived there for all of my adult life. And I see it in people earlier and earlier. I see it in teenagers now. So the truth that I can tell you is the odds are you've been invoking that response probably most of your adult life, and your body's been eating through your reserves to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And the reality is that you're going to end up having to make a choice. Decide that life gets smaller and smaller and smaller, or decide to change the pattern that got you there. It ends up being kind of that simple. So go through that checklist. Pay attention. You know, where am I in that paradigm? Is it starting to show up in my mind, in my mood? Anxiety is another chronic stress response signal. And am I seeing those signs and symptoms? And really ask yourself, like, how am I okay with that? Like, am I cool with riding the line and hoping I don't fall off the cliff? Or do I want to start to learn how to slow down and look at why I do things and eat to nourish my cells and really understand what my body's been asking for and take proactive action now, so that I get to have my health and my vitality as I age, as I live out, you know, the wisdom years, and actually do something brilliant with all the knowledge and love and wonder that you've collected over a lifetime. All right, you guys are amazing. I just want you to be kind to you. Really think about, have I been living in an addicted, distressed state? If you recognize, yeah, I have, that's where I live, and want to be able to look at, well, what's really happened in your body, then it's time to reach out. You know, this is what we do in the Thriving Health program. We solve the root issues. We reset those cells. We take you out of stress response. We teach you what that looks like for you, the techniques to sustain it. We address the damage that's happened in the meantime. We give you the tools to do the repair and to bring your body into that high state of function and teach you how to stay there. All right, everyone, blessings.